Jake was a seasoned truck driver, having navigated countless miles of American highways. On a particularly dark and stormy night, he found himself driving through the remote stretches of New Mexico. The rain poured relentlessly, and the road was barely visible through the heavy sheets of water cascading down his windshield. It was nearing midnight when Jake saw a figure standing on the side of the road, drenched and shivering. Against his better judgment, he decided to stop and offer a ride. After all, it was a miserable night to be stranded. Jake rolled down his window. "Need a lift?" The figure, a young woman, nodded gratefully. "Yes, please. Thank you so much." She climbed into the cab, water dripping from her clothes. Jake handed her a towel from his back seat. "Where are you headed?" "Just the next town, please," she said softly, avoiding his gaze. The truck resumed its journey through the storm. They drove in silence. The only sounds were the drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. Jake tried to make small talk, but the woman remained mostly silent, staring out the window. Something about her seemed off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. As they approached the next town, Jake noticed the fuel gauge was low. He decided to stop at a gas station. "I need to fill up. You want to get something to eat or drink?" The woman nodded, and they both got out. While Jake was pumping gas, he glanced inside the convenience store and saw the woman talking to the clerk. He couldn't hear their conversation, but the clerk's expression turned from bored to alarmed. Jake hurried inside just as the clerk stammered, "That girl, she died in an accident on this road 5 years ago." Jake's blood ran cold. He turned to look at the woman, but she was no longer there. The clerk handed Jake an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Young woman killed in tragic accident." The photo was unmistakably her. Jake's mind raced. He rushed back to his truck, half expecting her to be waiting inside, but the cab was empty. The only trace of her presence was the wet towel on the passenger seat. Heart pounding, Jake drove off, determined to leave the eerie encounter behind. But as he glanced in his rearview mirror, he saw her standing by the roadside again, watching him with hollow eyes. Jake never picked up another hitchhiker, and every time he drove that stretch of road, he felt her eyes following him, waiting for the next stormy night to find another ride. I had just pulled into a truck stop inside Billings, Montana. I was playing slots, and a beautiful American Indian girl was serving drinks. After quite a few drinks, I started chatting with her on a more personal level. She told me that her shift ended in a few hours, and that she would be behind the truck stop with a case of beer if I felt like partying. I did. I hung around the front of the building, and when everyone started filing out of the doors, I went around back to meet her. I couldn't find her, but I found an older Mexican woman who seemed to know my name and acted as if I had just been talking to her inside. I was buzzed, but not drunk or stupid. I knew this wasn't the same person. What also struck me as odd is that she had no personal belongings besides the clothes on her back. No purse or keyring, nothing. I, starting to feel a little tripped out because of this, began to act like I didn't know her and didn't want anything to do with her. She became cold and stopped trying to talk to me. Okay, well, that was freaking weird. I walk all the way back out to my truck, climb in the back, change into my sleepwear, and laid on the bunk to reread a book. Only a few minutes into the book, I hear 3 loud bangs on the side of my sleeper. I'm talking, "Holy crap, your truck's on fire. You have to get out now," loud. I opened the curtains and rolled down the window and saw that the young American Indian woman I had been speaking with was standing next to my truck. I immediately picked up something wrong about her. It wasn't her lack of speech, odd, disheveled look, or rigid body movements. It was her eyes that got to me. Solid black. I could say that the dark night coupled with a few drinks could make me think her eyes were black, but I'm not. When I hit a switch in the back of my truck, the inside lights up like a baseball stadium. Her eyes seem to be pulling the light into them, like miniature black holes. It reminded me of when a woman wearing mascara cries, and she kind of looks like a raccoon afterwards. It looked like she had rubbed charcoal around her eyes. It also felt like my body was acting of its own accord. like my body was screaming at my fragile psyche to open the door and let her into my truck, despite the fact that she looked freaking terrifying and hadn't said a single word to me since meeting her again. I remember having to choke out the word, no. It reminded me of when you're on the verge of tears, but you choke through them to speak to someone. I was too damn terrified to look out my side vents to see if she was still standing outside. I was too terrified that I might have ended up looking back into darkness, only to know, in my mind's eye, that she could be staring right back at me. I've got the shakes just from remembering that. Tom had been driving trucks for over 20 years. He knew every major highway and back road in America, but Route 66 held a special place in his heart. It was a relic of a bygone era, a stretch of road with its own tales and mysteries. This particular night, Tom was hauling a load through the Arizona desert, the desolate road illuminated only by his headlights and the pale moonlight. The radio crackled, and Tom caught the end of a weather warning. A storm was moving in fast, unusual for this time of year. He checked his watch midnight. As the first drops of rain spattered his windshield, he saw a figure on the roadside. A young man with his thumb out, drenched and shivering. Tom pulled over and rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" The hitchhiker nodded, his eyes wide with a mix of relief and fear. "Thanks. I need to get to the next town." Tom motioned for him to get in. The young man climbed into the cab, water dripping from his clothes. They drove in silence for a few miles before Tom tried to strike up a conversation. "What's your name, kid?" "Sam," the hitchhiker replied. "Got caught in the storm." Tom nodded. "Happens. You from around here?" Sam shook his head. "Just passing through." As the rain intensified, Tom's truck headlights caught the outlines of an old, abandoned diner by the road. Its neon sign flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows. Tom had passed this spot countless times, but tonight it felt different, more menacing. Without warning, the truck's engine sputtered and died. Tom